is NBC Palm Springs.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gino Lamont.
And I'm Sarah Sanchez.
We begin tonight with breaking news. Tonight in Palm Springs, there's been another shooting in an area that's seen a lot of shooting in the last couple of weeks. Palm Springs police responded to reports of shots fired on Westgate Drive near Eastgate Road. Those reports came in about 2 o'clock this afternoon. This is in the Desert Highland Gateway Estates. It's currently an active police scene with setting up of crime tape. Shell casings are in the street and bullet holes are in the door of a gray vehicle. But right now, no reports of anyone who was injured. But again, breaking news, Palm Springs police investigating yet another shooting in the Desert Highlands area of Palm Springs. This is the kind of news we've been reporting for almost daily for nearly 2 weeks now. Another shooting investigation. Maybe someone hit cars with bullet holes. Neighbors are afraid to talk to us, feeling like their safety is at risk, their neighborhood under siege. But tonight, we learn new information on how law enforcement is making some headway in these investigations. Kitty Alvarado in studio with more on that. Kitty.
Well, it's been really tough to solve many of these crimes because they really need the community support. But overall, crime in the city of Palm Springs and also in Indio seems to be on the rise. Both departments say they need the community support. Early Wednesday morning, the Desert Regional SWAT team arrested a 16-year-old boy in connection with the murders and violence being unleashed by rival gangs in Desert Highlands Estate and Sunrise Santiago Mobile Home Park.
He was charged with a negligent discharge of a firearm, conspiracy, and a battery.
And just 2 weeks ago, 2 other teenagers were arrested. One is 15 years old, the other 16. One of them is being charged with murder.
We're not giving details as to which murder or any of that right now because there's still additional evidence and suspects being sought in connection with these homicides.
Since October, there have been 24 crime scenes and 4 murders in the area. Lieutenant William Hutchinson says the few are putting many at risk.
In any community, in any area, it's a really small percentage of people that are committing the majority of crimes.
But overall, he says the ongoing violence may be getting worse because of the stress caused by the pandemic.
We have people out of work and out of school. And a lot of time to themselves, and we understand tensions are high on a lot of different levels.
Ben Guitron from the Indio Police Department agrees.
Our summer compared to the last summer, totally different. We weren't dealing with half of the challenges everybody's dealing with.
Police in Indio are trying to solve a murder that happened on Saturday and also looking for this suspect, Jesse Hernandez, who they say shot a female driving by K&A Market. He does say one type of crime is down.
Property crimes like burglaries and so forth, because I think people are mostly home right now. Everybody's pretty vigilant.
Both departments say a big part of the problem is people aren't reporting crime.
We need that information from the public to help put an end to this.
And in total, 15 people have been arrested in connection with that violence in Palm Springs. The Palm Springs Police Department says anyone who has information can report it anonymously, and they truly need the community's help to turn this around. I'm Kitty Alvarado.
All right, thank you, Kitty. We're also following a fire in Palm Springs, this one on Birdie Way near Winner's Circle. This is a gated community. Now, we are told that one person was taken to the hospital with burn-related injuries, and a firefighter was transported with an injury as well, but no specifics on that one yet. But again, a fire earlier this afternoon. And now to our continuing coverage of the coronavirus pandemic and contact tracing, still a key discussion in the fighting of COVID-19. Our Nico Payne shows us how a new feature from Apple and Google allows people to opt in to COVID-19 exposure notification system.
If you've gone into the settings of your phone recently, you might have noticed a new option. iOS and Android users can now opt into a system to receive a notification for possible exposure to coronavirus. Using Bluetooth, the system records when 2 or more smartphones come within a certain distance of each other. So if someone contracts the virus, anyone they came in contact with will get a notification that they may have been exposed. But will Riverside County be adopting this new system and using it in the fight against coronavirus? We spoke to the county's director of contact tracing to find out.
We have some very clear protocol that we follow for contact tracing, and so we do that by having direct contact with the individuals and doing follow-up calls and utilizing software that we've worked with to get approval through the county, and that is not something that at this time the county has decided to utilize or is exploring using.
The county has had a problem with contact tracing, mainly with people not responding. Last week, we saw over 12,000 new recoveries added to the county's total. But those were people who couldn't be reached after 45 days, and officials just assumed they no longer had the virus.
They're the ones that are examining that data as we speak, and they look at that recovery data. We're still getting a lot of cases, and we do come across some challenges still with cases, individuals who are positive for COVID, feeling comfortable to share their contacts.
Kevin Esveld, an assistant professor at MIT, has been working with Apple and Google on the contact tracing system. He says if widely adopted, it could be a valuable tool not just against coronavirus, but all future pandemics.
Single most important aspect is that it has to be distributed. It has to be decentralized. If built correctly, this could be a very powerful defense against all pandemics.
Nico Payne, NBC Palm Springs.
Some states have been using the app version, but this new version means health agencies won't need to build a contact tracing app of their own. Again, at this time, Riverside County is not including this feature as part of its contact tracing procedures. Let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers for Riverside County and the entire Coachella Valley. 153 new cases were reported in Riverside County. 25 of those were from the Coachella Valley. There were 7 new deaths countywide, and 1 was from the Valley.
Coronavirus coverage brought to you by East Valley COVID-19 testing site, serving residents of eastern Coachella Valley.
And just after all that, we've learned about the first flu-related death in Riverside County of the 2020-2021 season. It was a man in his 80s from San Jacinto Valley. He died last week in Moreno Valley. Now, during the last flu season, there were 8 related deaths. In the previous season, 9 deaths. Now let's take a look at the progress fire crews are making on those fires burning in Northern California. These fires were started just a couple weeks ago after multiple lightning strikes in the area and initially spread quickly because of hot and dry weather. The SCU and LNU lightning complex fires are both a little over 70% contained, and combined, they've burned over 765,000 acres. The CZU lightning complex fire is 46% contained. It has burned over 85,000 acres. California National Guard troops are on the fire line for the CZU fire, working side by side with fire crews. Governor Newsom tours the devastation left behind from the CZU fire. Newsom visited Big Basin State Park, where redwood trees are now blackened. He said he'll step up efforts to protect the forest and will send more CAL FIRE resources after complaints the agency was short-staffed. Officials say it will be at least a year before the public will be allowed back into beautiful Big Basin State Park. Let's send things over now to Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett for a look at our forecast. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Sarah. I'm extremely concerned as we're going into this Labor Day weekend, just as firefighters are starting to get the upper hand on some of those fires that are burning in northern and central California. We are tracking yet another heat wave going into this long weekend. We're talking about an expanding ridge of high pressure that's really going to take over the entire southwest. In fact, the entire west coast will experience temperatures that'll be anywhere between about 6 to 12 degrees above average. But along with that, the position of this high is really going to bring some drying and possibly even some offshore flow, which you and I both know means even drier conditions here in Southern California, raising those fire risks. Looks like it's going to be lasting through the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We will actually be under watches and warnings. In fact, while we're talking about that, take a look at radar right now. Aside from a little radar anomaly I've got going on, which I'm assuming is smoke up in Northern California and in Oregon there's nothing, and I do mean nothing, literally over the entire western third of the country. That's what high pressure does. Now, as I push the button here, we've got watches and warnings of plenty. We've been talking about this yesterday. That excessive heat watch that we are under now has been upgraded to a warning. So the red has now been changed to purple. And that's not just the Coachella Valley. We're literally talking about all of Southern California. This time, what's different is the entire coast and mountains above 5,000 feet will be experiencing temperatures that will push the mid-90s as we go into the weekend. Looks like that heat will peak on Saturday. It'll still be very hot on Sunday, but as we go towards next week, tracking some relief. I'll tell you about that coming up. Meanwhile, this looks pretty good by comparison. 105 out there. It felt pretty good today, aside from the fact that we've got that southeasterly flow pushing in today, pushed a lot of mist into the valley. If you notice that, if you're looking up towards the mountains today, very difficult to see them because of that flow. Like always, we're expecting that to switch around to the northwest here within another hour or so and get some ventilation going. But as a result, we're tracking some humidity that's riding in the upper teens right now. Next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air shows us warmer on Thursday, breaking solidly into the mid-1 teens on Friday. And then Saturday, here it comes. We're going to get into the upper 1 teens there as well. Could be pushing 120 in some spots. And once again, those overnights riding in the upper 80s and lower 90s. We'll take a look at this in its entirety and more importantly, when the cooler weather returns coming up.
All right, thank you, Mike. Still ahead, remembering an important day in history, which ended World War II. We'll show you how the Valley is commemorating the day.
And Jeopardy is one of the longest running game shows on television, invented by the Valley's own Merv Griffin. But it's all changing in the age of COVID. We'll show you how. That's coming up.
Well, Jeopardy is headed into its 37th season. Contestants will still have to answer in the form of a question, and Alex Trebek will still be hosting. But the audition process has changed. The Jeopardy crew was supposed to be screening contestants and holding mock games out here in Palm Springs, but that is all now moved online. So we've got an exclusive look for you at how the pandemic is changing the world's greatest game show. In a time filled with questions.
What about people who recover? What are they going to be like 6 months from now? We don't know that.
Fans rely on Jeopardy for answers.
What is fear of the moon?
But since the pandemic began, fans have had to settle for reruns and a trip through time with host Alex Trebek. But now Jeopardy is back in the studio, and filming has begun in an empty COVID-19 compliant studio for its 37th season. But they need contestants, and the crew put out a casting call for the Palm Springs area.
And we're going to be taking a written test first.
Now, normally they would pack everybody into a crowded hotel ballroom.
In the past, we used to travel to different cities. People would come in from all different areas. It wasn't only in that specific city. So some people had to travel quite a long distance to be at these auditions.
But in the era of COVID-19, the whole process has been streamlined.
Now, with these Zoom auditions, the way we've been doing it the past couple of months, it's so convenient.
Would-be contestants take the online test. Then, if they pass muster, until they make it to an in-person interview and a mock gameplay. We were able to listen in as contestants practice with pens instead of buzzers.
In Jamaica in 6.
Contestant coordinator Karina Nushu says the new Anytime test and Zoom auditions have broadened the playing field.
People who maybe had to work or have to work evenings and weren't able to take the test can now take the test. I think that's immensely beneficial for us.
These 5 local contestants come from all walks of life, but of course they have one thing in common.
Jeopardy is just such a pleasure. You know, we watch it every day, 5 days a week.
Jeopardy is a way in which to take your mind off of all the troubles at the moment. That
our own team even tried our hand at a few rounds.
Do British history for 600. Who's Disraeli?
No.
We get that a lot.
So much easier when I'm sitting on my living room.
All right. So, Karina said so far the craziest things she's seen in these home auditions are usually just pets that keep jumping in the laps of the owners in the middle of the mock gameplay. The new season of Jeopardy begins September 14th, and of course you can watch it right here on NBC Palm Springs.
Okay, Gino, before we head to break, we're going to do a quick round of Jeopardy. The categories are meteorologist, our desert past, thermodynamics, reality television, Palm Springs Walk of Stars, and potpourri. Let's try meteorologist for 600.
All right.
This chief meteorologist for NBC Palm Springs is such a big deal, he has his own Facebook page. Let's try it out.
All right, Final Jeopardy here, right?
Yes. What are you going to wager?
Question is, who is Fritz Coleman? Is that right?
I said, who is Al Roker? Al Roker.
Anybody? Are these right answers?
Are we right?
I'll take that for 600, please.
Speaking of which, he'll be back after this. Not Al Roker.
Welcome back. Look at that. There's a gorgeous live look for you, courtesy of our Agua Caliente Casino Cam. Just a reminder that you live in the Sonoran Desert and it's early September. You know what? You're going to get another reminder this weekend. We'll talk about that in a moment, but wow. Another gorgeous shot. This is your Agua Caliente Casino Cam from downtown Palm Springs, California. Looking off towards the west tonight. Not seeing a whole lot going on there. There were some cumulus clouds towards the east today, but nothing looks like it's going to bring us any beneficial rain. Let me start with the good news. In case you missed it last night or even the night before, we got a big full moon out there. It technically was full last night around 11:30, but if you head out there tonight, right around 7:53, it's going to come up. This is the one that's the pre-harvest moon. So it's called the corn moon, the fruit moon. My favorite is the barley moon. This is when they start harvesting barley and putting all that beer together for Oktoberfest in a couple of months there. Take a look at the big picture. You should not see any trouble finding the moon tonight. We have no cloud cover whatsoever. There is still some of that mist that's hanging out there. It was a bit on the humid side today, but it looks like it's going to settle out to a very clear night. In fact, look at this. The entire west has a whole lot of nothing going on. You can see that clockwise flow around the high. Jet stream taking everything that's coming in off the Pacific and driving it way up into British Columbia. So even Washington really doesn't see a whole lot in the way of rain or cloud cover. Oregon's going to be warm. Idaho's going to be warm. You get the idea. The entire western half of the country is bracing for some hot heat. Look at that. Just like yesterday, we're just tracking any cloud cover literally being pushed off towards the east. That's going to set us up for a very hot and very dry Labor Day weekend. So as we look towards Friday, we'll see temperatures that will bounce up into the solid 1-teens. 113 to 117 will be the range here. That high will eventually settle itself right in southern Nevada there, and that means we will be right underneath it there. In fact, could possibly see some offshore flow as we go into the weekend, and that dries things out even more, raises fire concerns in a big kind of way. We were discussing that earlier. So here's what we're looking at as we go into the weekend here. We'll see humidity start to drop slightly. It looks like minimum dew points will be in about the 50 range, and that'll put our minimum relative humidity at about 15% there. So it's going to be hot. It's going to be dry. We were talking about this earlier, but it bears repeating. Yesterday, we were under an excessive heat watch. That has now been upgraded to an excessive heat warning. And it's not just the Coachella Valley. We're talking about all the way out to the coast as well. So places like Santa Barbara, San Diego that weren't under those watches last time because it was going to be cool along the coast. Well, now everybody's going to be running about 10 degrees above average. And the further inland you go, the hotter it'll be. Vegas, Phoenix, Tucson, we're all bracing for that heat. 95 currently in the Yucca Valley, 103 in Desert Hot Springs. It's 101 in Coachella, 105 out towards 29 Palms. We've got some upper 80s out towards Idlewild and Anza, 79 in Big Bear. That looks good. 94 in Banning. Got that wind continuing to push in from the east. It'll make that diurnal switch around to the north and west a little later this evening, around 8 p.m. Could get up to about 15, 20 miles an hour. Fully welcome. Temperatures will cool efficiently tonight, but it will only settle us into the low to mid 80s tomorrow morning. Looks like we'll see those dew points riding in the low 50s and temperatures peaking in the 1-teens. Look for 112 in Palm Springs and in Indio, 113 Palm Desert, some low 100s out towards Joshua Tree and some mid 80s up in Big Bear. Your Comfort Air 7-day forecast shows a very warm weekend on the way. It looks like that's going to peak on Saturday. Overnights will be in the 90s, but hang in there, folks. We're going to see a dip starting next week. In fact, next Wednesday, back down to 104.
Old Navy will pay its workers to serve as poll workers on Election Day. Old Navy employees who serve as poll workers will be paid for 8 hours of work that day. They're also eligible for additional compensation by their local jurisdiction. 3/4 of millennial homeowners are making upgrades during the pandemic. It's part of a larger trend that kicked into high gear when much of the country shut down in March. Nearly half of those millennials are going into debt as a result of home makeovers.
The U.S. airline industry needs to cut labor costs by as much as 50% to survive, and even then, some carriers may simply not make it. That grim prediction comes from United Airlines. Experts say business travel will likely not recover until a vaccine is in full use. And as earthbound flights stall, travel to outer space may take off. Nearly 40% of wealthy people are interested in traveling to the edge of space because, well, they've been everywhere else. The new survey found a high level of interest among high net worth individuals to fly to space. A ticket will cost you $250,000, or roughly the same as first class.
Can you blame them for wanting to get off Earth? AMC says it will reopen 140 more movie theaters by Friday. That means 70% of the company's theaters, or 420 total, will be open by this holiday weekend. Other major theater chains have been opening up as well, but all theaters are facing the challenge of attracting audiences without any major releases. There are no movies to show. As we head to break, a reminder, you can watch any part of this newscast or our other NBC Palm Springs newscasts by using your smartphone camera and scan this QR code on your screen. Then you can watch us on the platform of your choice. We'll be right back.
It was 75 years ago that the World War II was officially over as Japanese officials signed the surrender document. Signing for the Allied forces, of course, was General Douglas MacArthur. This officially ended the Second World War. Of course, the war in Europe had been over for some months at this point. VJ Day, as it's known as, is August 15th, but it took another couple of weeks to get Japanese officials onto a boat in the South Pacific, along with General Douglas MacArthur, to sign the final armistice. Earlier today at Palm Springs Museum, a patriotic display on the ground and in the air as 4 vintage airplanes took off for a flyover across the Coachella Valley. This is a look at those planes taking off this morning at about 11:30, commemorating the end of World War II. The planes included a C-47 transport aircraft, a T-28 Trojan, which is a Navy plane. Fitting because there is also a commemoration at Pearl Harbor today. We thank the greatest generation for service to this country. We'll see you back here tonight at 6 o'clock.